Picture this. The hospital corridors are eerily quiet, but inside those walls absolute chaos is unfolding. The King of England is lying in a bed, surrounded by doctors and security, fighting for his health. But here's where it gets wild. His own son, the future king, has just done something that's sending shockwaves through the entire monarchy. Prince William has banned his stepmother from even stepping foot in that hospital room. Yeah, you heard that right. Camilla, the woman who's supposed to be Queen Consort, can't even see her own husband while he's fighting for his life. Now, before we dive into this absolute madness, I need you to understand something. This isn't just some family drama. This is centuries of tradition being torn apart in one brutal decision. So stick with me here, because what we're about to uncover goes way deeper than anyone's talking about. And trust me, by the end of this, you're going to see the British monarchy in a completely different light. Let's start with what actually went down. The order came fast, like really fast. According to people inside the palace, William gave this directive literally minutes after his father was rushed to the hospital. There was no family meeting, no discussion, no chance for anyone to weigh in. Security teams got their instructions in writing, crystal clear. Camilla wasn't allowed anywhere near that room, period. End of story. And get this, the document had William's signature right there at the bottom. Think about what that means for a second. This is a guy who's been groomed his entire life to respect protocol, to follow the rules, to keep the family united. But in this moment he threw all of that out the window. People who were close to the family said his demeanor was ice cold. One aide even whispered that he wasn't acting out of anger. No, this was something else entirely. This was deliberate, calculated. This was William finally making a move he'd been planning for a very long time. So Camilla's car pulls up to the hospital, right? She's expecting the usual treatment, the doors opening, people bowing, the whole royal reception. Instead, her driver gets stopped by two officers who basically tell her, nope, not happening. Can you imagine? She sat in that car for almost 20 minutes while her team frantically made phone calls, trying to figure out what was going on. Eventually, they just turned her around and sent her away. No cameras caught it at first, no official statement, nothing. Just silence and a woman who thought she was queen suddenly realizing she might not be anything at all. When the media got wind of this, they absolutely lost their minds. Headlines everywhere screaming about betrayal, power plays, family warfare. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Is the future king really undermining his own stepmother when she's at her most vulnerable? But here's the thing. If you know anything about the inner workings of the royal family, you'd realize this wasn't some sudden emotional outburst. This was the finale of a story that's been building for years. Look, the monarchy has always been good at one thing, maintaining the illusion that everything's fine, that they're all one big happy family, that they've moved past their problems. But William just shattered that illusion into a million pieces. By blocking Camilla from his father's bedside, he wasn't just denying her access to a hospital room. He was stripping away her power, her position, her entire identity within the royal structure. And here's the scary part. Did King Charles even know this was happening? Was he aware that his wife was being turned away while he lay there helpless? To really understand why William would do something this extreme, we need to rewind a bit. The king's health crisis wasn't your typical medical emergency. It started quietly, way too quietly. One minute, everyone's being told Charles is just resting. The next minute, phones are ringing off the hook, schedules are being wiped clean, and nobody's giving any real explanations. The official story that finally came out was thin, super vague, raising more questions than it answered. And here's where it gets suspicious. Reports about what actually happened kept contradicting each other. Some sources said it happened early morning, others said late night. The severity kept changing with every new whisper. Fatigue, complications, sudden weakness. Nobody could pin down the truth. And when things get that confusing that fast, it usually means someone wants time. Time to think, time to plan, time to make moves. Then came this deafening silence from the palace. No immediate statement, no reassuring appearances, nothing. The shutters came down and the media just filled that void with speculation. Was this really just about health, or had something else triggered the whole emergency? People on the inside were talking about tension in the days leading up to this, raised voices behind closed doors, stress that had been hidden from the public for way too long. But here's what really stunned everyone. Who got the first call when Charles collapsed? Not Camilla, not the senior officials. It was William. The heir to the throne was alerted almost instantly, placed right at the center of everything before the Queen Consort was even fully briefed. That detail alone sent chills through the palace staff. In situations like this, protocol is everything, and protocol had just been quietly rewritten. Catherine was nowhere to be seen during those initial hours, which only made things weirder. Staff were describing total confusion, people getting contradictory instructions, an atmosphere that felt broken rather than unified. This wasn't a family coming together in crisis. This was a system losing control while power slipped from one set of hands to another. Doctors moved Charles to a secure, undisclosed ward. They sealed off access and limited information even within the royal circle. Sure, they framed it as medical necessity, but people on the inside sensed something more. Isolation creates space, and space allows power to shift without anyone fighting back. In that controlled silence, new authority was taking shape. Meanwhile, Camilla was being kept dangerously out of the loop. Sources say she was only told Charles was unwell, not that the situation was critical. Hours went by before she understood how serious things were, and by then, all the important decisions were already being made. Whether it was deliberate or not doesn't even matter. The effect was the same. She was behind. And in the monarchy, being behind can destroy you. So when Camilla's car finally pulled up to that private hospital wing, she was expecting solemnity, maybe some sadness, but definitely respect. What she got instead was rejection, pure, brutal rejection. And it came straight from William. She stepped out of the vehicle calmly, surrounded by her aides, expecting the usual path to be cleared. But this time, 2 uniformed palace protection officers just stood there, arms crossed, not even making eye contact. Camilla paused. She could sense something was off. Then one of them stepped forward with a sealed document, and that's when her entire world started crumbling. The words were brief and brutally final. Access denied. And there at the bottom, unmistakable and defiant, was Prince William's signature. Everyone around her froze. Her aides started whispering frantically, pulling out phones, making calls, but those guards wouldn't budge an inch. The air got thick with discomfort. One hospital worker who saw it all later described it as an execution, not just a security procedure. Camilla's authority, which had always been contested, never fully accepted, had just been publicly demolished. A nurse who caught a glimpse of Camilla's face during this whole thing described her expression in one word: ashen. No fury, no outrage, just pure disbelief. The humiliation was complete. She wasn't just blocked from a room, she was erased. No seat at the bedside, no role in what was happening, nothing. In that moment, she was just another outsider. The security team looked uncomfortable, some reportedly apologizing quietly under their breath, but William's instructions were crystal clear. No entry, no exceptions, no matter what. This wasn't some logistical mistake. This was intentional, calculated, designed to send a message. Protocol had been broken, not by accident, but as a statement. And in the hours after, while the palace scrambled to control the damage, the press had already gotten what they needed. Paparazzi lenses caught what the monarchy desperately wanted to hide. Camilla, alone in the back seat of her car, face buried in her hands, her body shaking. Whether she was crying or just falling apart, nobody knows for sure, but that image set everything on fire. Public opinion split right down the middle. Some people said it was about time, a long overdue reckoning for the woman who once lurked in the shadows of Diana's pain. Others thought it was too cruel, too personal, crossing a line. Even hardcore monarchy supporters started whispering doubts. Had William gone too far this time? But the truth behind William's decision isn't just about protecting his father or following royal duty, it's about revenge. Deep, simmering revenge that's been building for years. And it all goes back to one person, Diana. For years, Prince William held everything back. He played the role of the dutiful son, the future king, the public shield. But behind those smiles there was a storm brewing, a storm triggered by Camilla's presence in his mother's shadow. And now, with his father lying helpless in a hospital bed, William finally made his move. The bitterness started long before Charles ever wore the crown. William watched his mother's dignity get slowly destroyed on the world stage, her heartbreak dissected in every newspaper headline, her marriage falling apart while another woman waited in the wings. The monarchy publicly moved on, but William never did. He carried the memory of Diana's silent suffering like a sacred oath. And no matter how many titles Camilla collected, she remained, in his eyes, the person who orchestrated his mother's despair. Behind palace walls, there were attempts at unity. Charles kept pushing for healing, for civility, even for some kind of affection between his son and his wife. But those efforts were met with cold, deliberate distance. William was never openly cruel. He never caused scandals. He didn't need to. He simply never allowed himself to be drawn into Camilla's world. Their interactions were courteous but absolutely glacial. Two actors on opposite ends of a stage, playing their parts but never truly connecting. People on the inside revealed some tense moments over the years. Heated exchanges, strained silences, and one infamous remark whispered after a particularly tense family gathering. "She'll never be my queen." It wasn't a tantrum. It was a verdict, a promise to himself that he kept locked away until the perfect moment arrived. After Queen Elizabeth passed and Charles took the throne, William's role expanded. So did his influence. Rumors started swirling about strategy meetings where William made it absolutely clear that Camilla's role would be managed, not celebrated. Invitations got withheld. Speeches were subtly revised. At one state function, her name was allegedly left off an official document. An oversight that nobody believed was accidental. It was all happening slowly, quietly, but it was definitely happening. The hospital ban wasn't some spontaneous decision. It was the culmination of years of silent warfare, a war William never declared out loud but waged through quiet power plays, subtle removals, and strategic silences. He watched, and when Charles collapsed, when the old guard fell into confusion, William didn't hesitate. He stepped in, not just as a son, but as a king in waiting, executing a sentence he'd been planning for years. Some people in the palace started whispering uncomfortable questions. Was this really about protecting Charles? Or was it about punishing Camilla? The lines blurred quickly. William's actions were being framed as protective, even necessary, but those close to the inner circle knew better. This was personal. A reckoning delivered without theatrics, but with absolute precision. The monarchy has always thrived on illusion. The illusion of unity, of forgiveness, of moving forward together. But William shattered that illusion in a single move. The moment he barred Camilla from Charles's side, he did more than just assert authority. He exposed a wound the palace had been trying to bury for decades. But what Camilla did just days before Charles's collapse might have been the final straw, the thing that pushed William from patient waiting to decisive action. Days before the hospitalization, Camilla was spotted leaving a discreet location, alone. Insiders now confirm she met with a powerful royal advisor completely behind William's back. The details of that meeting remain classified, but the timing, absolutely damning. The encounter happened at an unmarked townhouse in Belgravia, a location known in palace circles for its strategic discretion. Camilla arrived without security, without aides, and left just under an hour later with what sources described as a tight-lipped but resolved expression. She had met with Lord Ashbury, a man who once shaped Charles's early public image and who remains one of the most divisive figures in royal strategy. Ashbury has long opposed William's efforts to modernize the monarchy, calling it the slow death of royal mystique. His loyalty has always been with the old guard, and Camilla knew that. Surveillance footage that leaked shortly after Charles's collapse paints a chilling picture. Ashbury hadn't been seen in public for weeks. Then suddenly he emerges for this closed-door meeting with Camilla, followed by a flurry of private calls and a hushed visit to Clarence House. The whispers started immediately. Was this a move to alter Charles's regency provisions? Was Camilla trying to secure protection, maybe even leverage in case the king's health declined further? What made this meeting even more explosive was who didn't know about it. William had no idea. Sources close to his private office confirmed the meeting wasn't sanctioned, wasn't discussed, and definitely wasn't expected. When word reached him, it didn't come through official channels. It came as a leak from someone inside the security detail. William reportedly froze when he saw the surveillance photo. And in that silence, something fundamental shifted. The heir, who had kept his moves hidden behind the scenes, decided he wouldn't allow quiet manipulation to dictate the next chapter of the crown. Catherine's response was immediate and deeply personal. Having harbored suspicions about Camilla's unchecked influence over Charles for a long time, she viewed this secret meeting as a direct threat, not just to William's position, but to the entire future of the monarchy. People close to her say she warned her husband that if he didn't act now, they would lose control of the throne before ever sitting on it. Camilla, she believed, wasn't just overstepping, she was orchestrating something bigger, and the timing was too perfect to ignore. Just days later, Charles collapses. Suddenly, every decision, every ounce of control shifts to whoever's at his bedside. Camilla had tried to carve a path through the shadowy halls of power, but William caught her just in time. Her plan, whatever it was, didn't go unseen, and her actions, however veiled in politeness, were interpreted for exactly what they were: a challenge to William's right to reign. When William discovered this betrayal, he didn't just react, he declared war. While Camilla was plotting behind closed doors, Catherine was watching everything. And when her husband wavered between duty and fury, it was Catherine who drew the line. Her message to William was crystal clear: protect the legacy or lose it. Throughout all this chaos, Catherine remained calm. Not quiet calm, but focused, strategic calm. While others rushed to assess Charles's condition, manage the press, or contain Camilla's backlash, Catherine's focus was singular: the crown's future. She knew William was torn. As a son, he was conflicted. As an heir, he was outraged. As a husband, he was drifting under the weight of too many decisions. But Catherine wasn't conflicted at all. She saw this moment for exactly what it was: a test of resolve, a test of vision, and most importantly, a test of loyalty. Her distrust of Camilla wasn't sudden. It had been growing since Queen Elizabeth's death, when subtle shifts in tone and power started emerging. Private interactions between the two women grew colder, sharper. Accord, ding to palace whispers. A private confrontation after a public event left Catherine absolutely seething. Camilla had apparently questioned her influence. Catherine responded with silence, and that silence spoke volumes. From that moment on, there was no pretending anymore. So when the secret meeting with Lord Ashbury surfaced, Catherine didn't hesitate. She approached William not with uncertainty, but with precision. "Cut the rot now," she reportedly told him, "or it will poison everything we've built." That wasn't a suggestion. It was a demand. Catherine wasn't just protecting her husband. She was defending their throne. Her influence moved swiftly through the palace. Royal aides, some who had remained neutral during previous family tensions, suddenly closed ranks around William. Schedules were cleared, access lists were rewritten, security was briefed, and one instruction started echoing through the palace halls: no access, no exceptions. That wasn't Charles's directive. It was Catherine's will, carried through William's voice. The Queen-in-Waiting had spoken, and yet she didn't raise her voice. She didn't appear in front of cameras. She didn't need to. Her strength was in her stillness, in her absolute certainty. Catherine redefined this conflict, not as a family feud, but as a war for the soul of the monarchy. Camilla's move was personal. Catherine's response was constitutional. Staff noticed the shift immediately. Those once loyal to Camilla started distancing themselves. Communications grew terser. The palace atmosphere grew colder, yes, but also sharper, clearer. The fog had lifted, and standing in its place was a woman who understood that power isn't about making an noise. It's about having control, and she had just claimed it, But even as Camilla was locked out of the hospital, she wasn't ready to just disappear quietly. She had one card left to play, and she was about to use it. Camilla doesn't go down without a fight. Hours after her public humiliation outside that hospital, her team started leaking information, carefully curated sound bites, subtle threats, whispered secrets. What she revealed wasn't just personal gossip. This stuff could fracture the monarchy from the inside out. It started with a single sentence passed through a trusted aide to a friendly reporter. The crown was never meant for her. The words were deliberately vague, but their intent was razor sharp. The her was Catherine, and the meaning was unmistakable. Camilla wasn't just reacting anymore. She was retaliating with everything she had. Within minutes, palace briefings descended into chaos. What had been a carefully guarded narrative of order, control, and royal unity started cracking under the pressure of internal sabotage. The press exploded with contradictions. Some outlets reported Camilla had been denied access due to medical restrictions. Others claimed she'd voluntarily chosen not to intrude. But the truth, now weaponized by Camilla's team, started bleeding out. She hadn't been turned away by circumstance. She'd been banned. And now she was going to make that decision cost them dearly. Behind closed doors, whispers emerged about a hidden clause in Charles's will, one that allegedly secured not only titles but financial control to Camilla's family if certain conditions were met. Nobody confirmed it, but nobody denied it either. The timing of this rumors Elise was surgical. Just as William's grip was tightening, Camilla was threatening to pull the rug out from under the monarchy's entire future. Not with force, but with ink, with paper, with legacy. By midday, palace lawyers were being contacted, not to file a case, but to prepare for one that might be coming. Camilla wasn't going to sue the crown outright. That would be suicide. But she could rattle the foundations by threatening to expose what had been agreed to in the privacy of Charles's chambers, agreements that would never survive public scrutiny. The monarchy, after all, thrives on mystery, and Camilla was now a woman willing to burn down the veil. Caught between these warring sides was Charles's brother, dragged into quiet meetings with aides from both camps. He was being urged to mediate, to intervene, to restore balance. But the lines had already been drawn too deep. This was no longer about balance. It was about survival. And Camilla, despite being locked out of that hospital, was making it clear she was still very much a player in this war. Before disappearing from the public eye, she left one final message through a private channel. A warning. He will wake up, and he will remember. Whether it was a threat, a promise, or desperate hope, nobody could tell. But the monarchy had heard it loud and clear. The Queen Consort might have been exiled from Charles's bedside, but she had just detonated a grenade in the heart of the institution. But inside that hospital, another silence was growing heavier. The king still hadn't spoken, and the entire monarchy was waiting for just one word from him. When Charles finally opened his eyes, the room went still. But his first act wasn't a declaration or a command, it was silence. No mention of Camilla, no protest to William, just a quiet glance and a deepening mystery that nobody could solve. Doctors confirmed the king had regained partial consciousness late in the evening. Yet when asked basic questions, he responded only with nods. A flicker of acknowledgement here and there, nothing more. For a man who once commanded rooms with his mere presence, this silence felt louder than any speech ever could. The royal household waited for instruction, for clarification, for anything that might restore the normal chain of command. But Charles, in the most critical moment of his entire reign, said absolutely nothing. William was the first to visit. Their meeting, according to aides, was brief and shrouded in emotional restraint. No one else was allowed in that room. No aides, no advisors, no witnesses. Just father and son, heir and king. When William emerged, his face betrayed nothing. But palace insiders said his posture had changed. He walked taller, moved quicker, issued instructions with absolute finality. It was as if a torch had passed, not through words but through pure will. What troubled so many people was what didn't happen. There was no inquiry about Camilla, no call for her presence, no whispered name in private. A woman who had shared his life, his title, his reign was suddenly absent from his thoughts, or perhaps, more chillingly, deliberately excluded. The silence became its own message, open to interpretation and ripe for manipulation. Within the palace, speculation ignited like wildfire. Some believed Charles was simply too weak, mentally and emotionally, to confront the storm happening. Outside his hospital room. Others saw calculation, an agreement made with William before the collapse now being quietly upheld. But a few whispered a darker theory. That Charles, once cornered by years of guilt and obligation, had chosen his son's vision over his own heart. That this silence wasn't surrender, it was liberation. The hospital ward, once sterile and still, had transformed into the monarchy's shadow courtroom. Allegiances formed in hushed tones. Orders were carried on folded slips of paper, not grand proclamations. In the absence of the king's voice, power began flowing to whoever was willing to act. And William was already acting with absolute authority. Yet beyond the palace gates, the world remained frozen in confusion. No official statement, no family appearances, no sign of unity whatsoever. For a monarchy that has survived wars, divorces, and countless scandals, this moment felt unprecedented, because the danger wasn't coming from outside the walls. It was rising from within. Reporters waited, cameras rolled, millions around the world leaned in, all asking the same burning question. Would Charles break the silence? Would he defend his wife? Would he reclaim his crown from the quiet hands of his son? The answer never came, and each hour that passed without his voice became another brick in the wall being built between the past and the future of the monarchy. As days passed, one reality became impossible to ignore. Camilla's reign was over, even if nobody dared say it out loud. With Charles weakened and silent, and William rising as the true power behind the throne, the monarchy found itself with no queen and no roadmap for what comes next. Camilla vanished from the public calendar. Her name, once routinely attached to charitable appearances and formal engagements, was quietly removed. No explanations, no apologies, just silence where her presence used to be. Even those loyal to her went quiet, retreating from the front lines and blending into the shifting palace landscape. She hasn't been seen. She hasn't been summoned. In the eyes of the public, she's neither queen nor consort. She's a ghost walking outside the gates of power. Within palace walls, the shift was even more glaring. Royal aides, once split in their loyalties, were now flocking to William's inner circle. The future king wasn't waiting for some coronation ceremony. He was already building his court. New protocols were being discussed, new speechwriters hired, new alliances forged under his growing influence. Not a coup, not some dramatic announcement, just quiet, methodical control filling every space Charles's silence had left behind. And beside him, rising without ceremony but undeniable in presence, was Catherine. Her image now filled the void once occupied by Camilla. The press took note immediately. Headlines no longer paired king and queen together. Instead, it was William and Catherine everywhere you looked. At first it seemed symbolic. Now it feels structural, permanent. Without a queen actively in position, the public has crowned one in spirit. International observers called it exile in plain sight. A queen consort removed not by force or scandal, but by isolation. Her power eroded not in a dramatic moment, but over hours and days of calculated absence. And now, with no audience to rule and no court to command, Camilla exists outside the very monarchy she once fought so hard to join. Her crown still technically exists, but it rests on no head and holds no actual weight. Whispers grow louder every day that William has already assumed regency powers in everything but name. Decisions once reserved exclusively for Charles are now being run through his son. Speeches, statements, responses to crises, they all bear William's influence. And nobody's pushing back. Because in the silence, a void was created. And William filled it completely. The palace won't confirm any of this, the press won't print it as established fact, but the question hangs heavy over Britain's oldest institution. Has the abdication already happened and none of them will admit it? And if Charles never truly speaks again, who will really rule next? Look, this entire situation is absolutely unprecedented in modern royal history. We're watching power shift in real time, behind hospital doors and palace walls, with no cameras, no transparency, just whispers and strategic silences. William has made his move. Catherine has backed him completely. Camilla has been systematically removed from the equation. And Charles? He remains the silent center of a storm he may no longer control. The monarchy will survive this, it always does. But the shape it takes coming out of this crisis will be fundamentally different. The old guard is falling away. A new era is being forged not through ceremony and tradition, but through decisive action and quiet warfare. And whether you love them or hate them, you have to admit, we're witnessing history being written in the shadows. So what happens next? That's the question everyone's asking. Will Charles eventually speak? Will he defend Camilla? Or has he already made his choice by saying nothing? Will William officially take control, or will this shadow regency continue indefinitely? And what about Camilla? Does she have any moves left, or is her time in the royal spotlight truly over? One thing's for certain. The British monarchy will never be the same after this. The illusion of unity has been shattered, the carefully maintained facade has crumbled, and in its place we're seeing the raw reality of power, ambition, loyalty, and revenge playing out on the world stage. Thanks so much for sticking with me through this deep dive into royal chaos. If you found this as fascinating as I did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next in this unfolding drama. Because trust me, this story is far from over. There are more moves to be made, more secrets to be revealed, and more power shifts happening behind those palace walls. We'll be here to break it all down for you. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning what you see on the surface, because the real story is always happening beneath